Geddy Lee, but my birth name was Gershon Eliezer Weinrib, after my maternal grandfather who was murdered in the Holocaust. As per tradition, my mother, her sister, and her brother all named their firstborn male children in his honor. My cousins and I, all of us born within a couple of years of one another, were given that same first name, Gershon. In the old country, my family spoke both Yiddish and Polish, the former being the language they used at home and whenever they didn't want the Poles to understand what they were talking about. So my family all had both Yiddish and Polish names too. Mom, for example, was known as Manya and Malka. On most of the official documents I found, their Yiddish names were used, but sometimes spelled unrecognizably, as they would have been pronounced by some bureaucrat in the Polish or German government, or, after the Second World War, the International Refugee Organization. As was the case with my grandfather, whom I've seen referred to as Gershon, Gerzon, Garshin, and Garjon. Identification for these emigres was never a simple matter. My father's name, for example, had its own set of complications. His full Yiddish name was Moshe Meyer ben Aharon Halevi, a mouthful. Yet I recently discovered his old passport, in which his name is spelled out Mojek Weinrib, and its anglicized translation, Morris Weinrib. I'd never even heard the name Mojek before. My mom and our family usually called him Monyek, Moishe, or simply Morris. Clear as mud, right? After 11 days at sea, on December 20th, 1948, the ship carrying my parents from Germany docked in Halifax, Canada. They barely spoke any English as they walked down that ramp, so when they registered with Customs and Immigration, the official came up with anglicized approximations of their names, beginning with the same first letter. There's an oft-told fable, by the way, about a young Jewish boy arriving at Ellis Island in New York. An immigration official asks his name, and the fearful child responds in Yiddish, "Schon vergessen," which means, I forgot. And the official writes down, Sean Ferguson. Anyway, Manya became married, Moshe became Morris, and in turn, when their children were born, they gave us each a Jewish name and its English equivalent. In my case, Gershon and Gary. My middle name is Eliezer, but from kindergarten through to the end of public school, I answered at roll call to Lorne. Gary Lorne Weinrib. Confused? I was too. When I turned 16 and was preparing to apply for a driver's license and a Canadian Federation of Musicians card, I asked my mother for a copy of my birth certificate, which she duly requested from the government. When it arrived, I opened the envelope and I found myself listed as Gary Lee Weinrib. What the fuck? Mom, I said, what's going on here? It says my middle name is Lee, not Lorne. She looked away and thought about it for a moment and said with a sheepish laugh, "Oi, Take, yeah, I think maybe you were Lee. Your cousin, he was Lorne." I forgot. What? You forgot? I'm not sure what freaked me out more, my sudden loss of identity or the fact that my own mother couldn't remember my effing name. I recently discovered that my cousin, Gary Rubenstein, was in fact the actual recipient of the middle name Lorne. And the best explanation I have for the mix-up is that since my mom would have been speaking English for only a few years by the time I was born, the anglicized take on Eliezer was for her just an afterthought. After she and her siblings made a group decision for each of their kids, she misremembered which one they'd agreed on for me. But wait, there's more. My mom usually called me Garshin at home, saving Gary for when we were out in public. And then one day in my early teens, I was hanging out in front of our house with my pal Bird when she called me indoors for supper. "Geddy, come into the house." "Hey," Bird said, "if your name is Gary, how come she just called you Geddy?" I said, "Well, she didn't. Her accent only makes it sound that way." He laughed and said, "Well, I'm going to start calling you that too." And that was that. It stuck. Before long, all my friends were calling me Geddy. When I turned pro, the Musicians Union application form asked for profession, stage, or band name. And I thought, how cool. Now, perhaps I should be ashamed of this, but frankly, Weinrib sounded too Jewish to me. I was trying to fit into a less ethnic world, and I didn't think it sounded very rock and roll. Lennon, Plant, Clapton, Moon, Hendrix, now those were effin' rock star names. In an attempt at self-justification, I asked myself if Robert Allen Zimmerman had similar fears before he became Bob Dylan. So I combined my nickname, my middle name, to create a professional moniker for myself and legitimize my new aspiring identity. A few years later, I took that even further and changed my name legally to Geddy. By then, even my siblings were calling me Ged or Geddy, so it was all good. To people who asked, I'd explain that it was like in Leave It to Beaver, where the kid's real name was Theodore, but everyone, even his parents, called him the Beaver. So I had two identities right from birth, and now Geddy Lee made three. Thank you. I'd like to bring out the marvelous Matt Cameron to help me answer your questions. Welcome back.
Hey, it's good to be back. We heard a couple songs just right now. Can you, what were those songs?
Well, you might have heard one of them.
I think I might have.
When I came here way back in, what was it, 2000? Was it 2000 when I recorded here? So when I was writing this memoir, the co-producer, co-writer, my dear friend, Ben Mink, yes, great violinist, guitarist. Yeah, he deserves a round of applause for sure. He sent me these two demos that we had totally forgotten about. One of them was a song called Gone, and the other was a song called I Am, You Are. Gone was a song that I wrote. It was, in fact, it was the first song I wrote for the record we did together, My Favorite Headache. And it was written about what had recently transpired with Neil in his life, and he had lost his daughter. And it sort of describes that feeling that you have when someone is suddenly gone from your life and you're trying to make sense of it. You know, your whole instinct is to make sense of it, but you can't, because when you lose someone, you just can't. So that's the song, that's what the song is about. And at the time, I felt it was just too close to the bone for Neil, for me to put it on the record. So I left it unfinished. And the other song was about the troubles I was having in my relationship. And one particular conversation, maybe you've had this conversation with your mates, where you say one thing and they say another thing, and you just can't get on the same page. So again, it was a personal song, and I decided to leave it off. But when I heard it last year, there was something about it that I responded to, but I didn't know what context it was. And I wanted to share it, because in Rush we have so little extra music that we ever made. I thought it would be fun. So I called my friend and producer, David Bottrell. I don't know if you know that name, but he produced Peter Gabriel and Tool. Yes. And recently Crown Lands. I mean, he's an excellent producer, and he lives in Toronto. He came over to my house, and I played him for him. And he just loved them. And he said, you know, I think you should let me clean them up a bit and mix them. And so we did, and I was blown away. They really came to life. And they are on, I put them on the audiobook. So at the end of the audiobook, you can hear them if you happen to get that. But also, it's going to come out this week to radio or whatever streaming device you have. So
I want a CD.
thank you for asking. But it harkens back to our meeting.
Yeah.
Vinyl.
Well, in the book, you talk about My Favorite Headache, and two of the songs that you mentioned, Angel Share and Slipping, are two of the songs that really resonated with me. And when you asked me to do this appearance with you, I listened to those two songs after reading the book, and yeah, they're amazing songs, Geddy. And
Thank you.
That was and you know, your lyrics on those songs especially are really poignant and heartfelt and
I appreciate
very meaningful. So you know, that was thank you for letting me be a part of that moment in your career. I know that you were going through a pretty big transition at that point. You weren't really sure if the band was going to continue after Neil's what happened with Neil and his family. I was telling you backstage, like I was going through some pretty big changes around that time, late '90s as well. So it was a great, life affirming moment for me as well. And I'm glad that we could share that opportunity to make music together at such a high level.
Yeah, it was a blast for me. I mean, I had the best.
I hope you do more in the future.
Yeah, good idea. Okay, let's read some questions.
We've got some questions here from you, the beautiful audience in front of us here. Okay, my first question is from an aspiring guitarist from Fernie, BC, Alex Lifeson.
Oh, that
Lurks is
This
here.
guy.
Uh-oh. That same guy was in Seattle. Do we have a stalker situation?
Yeah, I
Should we,
think so. Yeah,
should we talk to some people?
He keeps calling me too.
What's up with these guys?
So annoying. Just wants to drink my wine.
Lurks asks, there are rumors of questionable behavior on your tour bus. It is alleged that often a bag of chips would be crushed in the proximity of a sleeping crew member's ear. Is there any truth to that rumor? And who would do such a thing?
Well, of course, I would never stand for such a thing, but that guy, Alex, yeah, he would do such a thing. Yeah, we used to you know what it's like, hours on a crew bus.
Hours and hours.
And sleeping on a shelf, we used to call ourselves shelf people. And so you'd finish a gig and you're all hyped up, but you've got 350 miles or something to drive. And so what do? You try to entertain yourself as best you can. Sometimes that involves substances of various sorts. Nothing more serious than, you know what I'm saying. And so we had this one game we used to play called Vector Theater, because the one thing that would help us sleep were taking Valiums. So Howard Underleiter, our tour manager, called them Vectors. And so he would dole us each a Valium, and we would put on a movie, we'd take the Valium, and we would see who falls asleep first and crashes their head into the blinds behind us. Then, of course, Alex would smash the potato chips in some sleeping person's ear, because he's that kind of guy. Yep, thank you, Alex. I really needed to explain that to these poor people.
Okay, John Freunds from Walnut Creek, California. Where are you?
John, where are you?
What's up, John?
Right there. Hi, John.
Woo-wee.
How are you, man?
Okay, John's question. The first Rush album I heard was Hold Your Fire.
Yeah.
One of my favorite Rush tracks is The Camera Eye. When the band recorded in the technology used to create some of the sounds was pretty new. Can you tell us a bit about planning the early live performances of some of those tracks that use the latest leading edge technology of the day before sampling and MIDI, like the Camera Eye, Vital Signs, The Weapon, New World Man, etc.?
Yeah, thank you for your question. That was a really difficult period for us because, we were bringing these keyboards into the studio and we didn't really know how we were going to be able to reproduce them. So Camera Eye was one in particular that was played on an Oberheim and had a particular setting. So that's really when my little corner of stage left started growing and growing in two directions. And for Vital Signs, we needed a sequencer and we needed to trigger that sequencer. So I had two keyboards, a MIDI Moog, a sequencer. And so with each advance in technology, something else was added. And I dreamed of being able to control all these things with my feet so I could still play bass. The thing that drove me crazy is I love to play bass more than anything else in music. It's my thing, right? And so, okay, I can do the singing thing. That's okay, I can still play bass and sing. But when I got into the keyboards, I was kind of robbing myself of my favorite thing. So I was desperate to create some kind of connection, some kind of device where I could play my pedals and it would trigger all these devices. Later, that was invented for me. It's called MIDI. But at the time, there was no such thing. So I hired this guy in Florida to build this giant keyboard thing for me, this rack. And he convinced me it could be done, and he set it all up, and he was working on it, and we were in Wales getting ready to record Hemispheres. We were writing Hemispheres at that time. And this big fucking thing arrives. My God, it was, we called it the Behemoth because that's what it was. And the best thing was, it didn't work. And so we had this tech guy at the studio in Wales, at Rockville. His name was Otto. He was a German guy, yeah? And so he wore the same sweatshirt for, I think, 3 months. And it had big holes in it, but, and his hair was always out like that. And he, oh yeah, I can fix this, I will go inside it and I will blah, 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 blah. And so him and my keyboard tech, Jack Secret, worked on this thing the whole fucking time. And they just couldn't get it to work. So it was just a total disaster. But anyway, about a year later, MIDI came out and my problem was solved. So thank you for the question. And that's a very long, involved answer.
All right, we have Luke from Santa Rosa, California. Luke?
Luke, where are you?
Luke!
Up there.
Hey, Luke. All right. All right.
Who else is from Santa Rosa, I think? Brent Smith is from Santa Rosa, isn't he? Oh, these people are. Maybe. I don't know.
Okay, Luke asks, huge Giants fan. We miss Brandon Belt and Kevin Gaussman.
I bet you do.
You've toured with some memorable opening bands, the most memorable for me being Melvins at the Cow Palace, 1994. Can you talk a little bit about your experience with them or any other interesting experiences with your opening acts over the years?
Well, I love playing with the Melvins. I think we only did 4 or 5 shows with them. And I was recently reminded of those shows when I was reading about your new record. And this question wasn't planted. This is a real question from that dude. But he did this record with some of the guys from the Melvins.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I just released a record store day release, Black Friday, last Friday. The Melvins played a big part in our Seattle music scene in the 80s and 90s. They were hugely influential to all of us fellow musicians back in the day. And I reconnected with the Melvins in 2019. They played the Chris Cornell tribute concert we did together in January. Yeah, thank you. And and so I kind of reconnected with those guys, and I was emailing Buzz, and I just said, hey man, let's do something. And so
That's great.
this is what we did together. And
Nice.
Thank you.
That's awesome. No, we played with a lot of great bands over the years. Obviously, in the early days, we really connected with a band called UFO.
Yeah!
They were unusual fellas. I got very close with Pete Way, the bass player, but they just loved to take the piss out of us, and they were nonstop, and they were relentless. There was one time, that's back when we were doing Xanadu, and we would wear our absurdly prophetic robes on stage, and we would start Xanadu with dry ice, and it would fill the stage. And one time, the dry ice disappeared, and there were a pair of furry slippers nailed to the stage beside my pedals. And Pete was at the side of the stage. Glee, he used to call me Glee. Glee, are you going to drink the milk of paradise? And so we had a great time with those guys. They were. One time, Pete Way, I was sitting in my bus listening to Bill Bruford's new solo album.
Yes.
Feels Good to Me. I mean, fantastic. Jeff Berlin, the bass player on that album, amazing. And Pete comes in, and he's listening to this music, and he's a rock and roller, man. He's not into this fancy, complicated music. And he says, Glee, don't do it. Stop. Don't listen to this. It's bad for you. You're going to start writing music like that. Don't do it. So he was a real character. And my other favorite band, a number of years later, of course, from...
Right here.
That's it. Timeless, and I believe Tim Alexander's here tonight with his family. So let's hear it for those guys. We had just great times together. We used to jam before the shows, usually in their dressing room or somewhere in between, and the rule was you could never play your own instrument. So it got pretty outside. I think Timmy was telling me today, reminding me about a time Alex would play the trumpet, and he couldn't play the trumpet, at all. And he did it on stage with them one night. So that, I don't remember that. I must have blocked it from my mind. Anyway, thank you for your question.
Sweet. Alvin Lai, Castro Valley. Where are you, Alvin?
Where are you?
I'm here.
Alvin.
There he is.
Yeah. Okay, been a Rush fan since I was 13 and saved my allowance to buy moving pictures on 8-track. 8-track. Remember those days?
Still have it?
Wow. Long time ago. Been to shows on every tour, starting with Grace Under Pressure. Being a huge fan of baseball, would you consider buying the Oakland Athletics?
I don't know how much change I have on my pocket. Well, you know what? I would love to own the Oakland A's. Of course, I would keep them in Oakland, but I have to say that to an Oakland crowd. Well, I would love to be an owner of a team. Somebody asked me the other day if I got a job in baseball, which role would I be happy with? And I said, well, of course, the GM. I'd have to be the GM. I'm sorry to hear that the A's are going to leave. That's a bummer. And, I can't buy them, I'm afraid. My wife would be really upset. Thank you for your question, though.
Great question.
I hope she's not listening.
Yeah, it's forever.
We have Slappy McGee.
Slappy.
Moraga.
Slappy McGee.
Like that
California.
name. Where's Slappy
Where's
McGee?
Slappy at?
Slappy.
There. Right on. Right. Oh, there he is. He's down there.
Oh,
Is that a
Slappy.
Slappy. Is that a
What's up,
nickname?
man?
And what did you do to deserve it? Or should I ask?
Okay. Slappy asks, fan since 1984. Although most questions about Rush lyrics would likely be for Neil, this one is for Geddy, as the song in question is from the self-titled pre-Neil debut. For years and years I've wondered in Working Man, when you get home at 5 o'clock, do you dig yourself out a nice cold beer or an ice cold beer? I'm sure all
Really?
Rush fans are dying to know. Good question.
Really? Somebody's wondering about that? Are you ready? It's an ice cold beer. Thank you very much.
Grammatically correct.
But the story about how I came to write that song is really interesting because in the early days with John Rutsey, he used to write the lyrics, but he was very slow to put them down on paper. And so in the meantime, I would, make them up, kind of on spur of the moment, and they'd be a little different every night. And that song reminded me of when I turned 18. When Alex and I turned 18, the drinking age had just lowered to 18. So finally we could legally get drunk. So in Ontario, they had what they call men's rooms. It's an antiquated concept, of course, but they were bars that you go into, and literally only men were allowed in. And you'd sit at these little round cafe tables, and all these guys would come around with jugs of beer. And the rooms were really badly lit, fluorescent lights, and it smelled of, the stuff they cleaned the tables with. And I remember sitting there, drinking this beer and looking around the room, and they were all working guys, They were all people that worked hard. They went straight to the men's room after they got off at 5 o'clock and drank their substantial number of beers before they headed home. And I just thought, God, there's got to be a better life than this, And it stayed with me. And so that's how Working Man was really born. And it was sort of all about that. And then fast forward to when we're recording the first album. And we really recorded the first album in about 3-4 days, nights, working all night after we'd finished playing in a bar. We'd play till 1 in the morning. We were doing, at that time, we were doing 5 sets a night. And so we'd load out from this one bar called the Gasworks in Toronto, and we'd load into a recording studio, 8-track studio is all we could afford. And we'd record all night, and then we'd bring the gear back the next day, load back into the bar. You get the picture. So on the third day, I had to record all the vocals. And I was super excited. I'd never recorded in a proper studio and sang in a proper vocal booth. And we were waiting for the lyrics, and they never came. And he just didn't show up. So I had to sit down for an hour and scratch out all the lyrics based on what I'd been singing. And that's the lyrics for the first album. And when we saw John the next day, we said, what the fuck happened? And he said, well, I hated them, so I tore them all up. Oh, phone call would have been nice. Phone call would have been nice. Anyway, so thank you. There's a long answer to a short question.
Right, we got John Freunds, Walnut Creek, California. John,
Where you at?
what's up? What's up, John?
Hello.
Big fan since 1988. Got a lot of 80s fans here. Love it. Having seen fame from both sides with your own notoriety as well as having met musical peers that you might have viewed as untouchable musical idols earlier in life.
Like this guy?
No, like this guy. This guy. How has your own relationship with fame changed over the years? How have you approached people who are famous to you? How you approach people? Okay, maybe.
I get the picture.
Yeah, it's this isn't written correctly. Is there any mantra you keep on hand to deal with the less enjoyable parts of fame?
Well, fame is a difficult thing to explain because it's so weird. you know, because you set out to become a musician, and you think, wouldn't it be great to be famous, but you have no fucking idea what that means. And so you work, you know, with a band like us, we were an overnight sensation after 20 years. So, we would work and work and work, and you'd get a little bit of fame, and then you'd slide down, then we'd get up a certain level, and then we'd work our way down the ladder of success, and then work our way up and down. That's the way it was. And so we had a lot of time to adjust to those things. And early on in our first couple of tours, we'd meet some famous people, and sometimes they weren't so nice. And you'd go, don't want to meet my heroes anymore because they might not be nice. But that's just a generalization. That's not true. One of the things I loved about the scene that you came from, we were talking about this the other night, was that the great thing about the grunge movement, and I know that's an oft-misused expression, but you know, where I came from in Toronto, there was no sense of community between musicians. It was all competition because we're all trying to get in the same bar gigs, and so, you know, you were friendly, but it was not close. And the Brits, you know, they had this idea of when you became a successful rock star, you were kind of like a lord and lord of the manor, and it was, again, a bit alienating, you know. But your scene was inclusive. You guys all played on each other's records, you were really relaxed about the whole idea of making music and casual, and Neil, Alex, and I really were drawn to that and really respected that scene. And that's where we wanted to be. But it's a slippery slope. I tell a story. You see, Neil was very shy, and he was intimidated by people asking for autographs. In the early days, you know, we would sign for people after shows and things like that. And he would go along with it because Alex and I would go along with it. And later in his life, he got a little prickly about it, shall we say. And so he decided he just didn't want to do that. And that became a kind of paranoia for him, and it's really not a healthy experience. But it was a little contagious, and I went through one period, and one episode that happened to me that changed me was, we had just finished a long tour. The last gig was in Germany. I was about to leave on a trip with Nancy through Germany. And Nancy and I had gone through a kind of rough patch, so things were not ideal, a little tense. And here we're gonna have a holiday together. And I was driving towards the exit of the parking lot. I was driving myself away from the tour. And there were a group of fans from our Italian fan club that had come all the way. And I saw them all gathered at the exit. And I stopped my car, and I turned around, and I went the other way to avoid it. And about halfway to the hotel, I said, what the fuck am I doing? What are you thinking? What would it have taken for me to stop for a few minutes and say hello and sign a couple of things and then just drive off? But I had gotten in that mindset that he had, and it disturbed the fuck out of me. So I just vowed I would never be like that. Of course, unless I'm confronted by resellers at an airport or something like that. That's a whole different thing. But I learned a lot from that terrible incident. I decided that when I meet a fan in the street, that I'll try to make the experience nice for them and nice for me. So that's all you can do. I don't know if that answers your question, but...
Blue, you red.
Black. Works for me.
We have Rich Slater from Concord, California.
Rich?
Rich. Where's Rich?
Where's Rich?
Top row.
Hey, Rich. Way up top.
Way up there?
Go on, man.
Right on.
All right. Thank you for all the music. Saw Rush 10 times in concert, including twice in my hometown, Concord. Yeah. Love Subdivisions, so do I. And Bravado, those songs talk to my heart. I have a million questions. You ready for a million questions? But I'll ask just this. Is there any more obscure Rush material that could possibly be released someday? Any outtakes, sound checks? There are a handful of Rush songs that were played live but never made it onto a live album. If you guys put it out there, Geddy, we will buy it. And so will I. Thanks for everything. Love you, Alex and Neil.
Okay, I can safely say there are no unreleased original songs that you guys haven't already got. When we wrote songs, and if we weren't happy with them, we just trashed them. We never kept them. So usually what we ended up with on an album were the only songs we made for that album. But we do have lots of live tapes. Now, some of them were recorded as sort of board tapes. And so that requires, there's been huge technological changes over the decades, of course. And there was a couple of tours we recorded on these things called ADATs. It's a boring subject, but you know what I'm talking about.
All too well.
Yeah, and you have to transfer those and then sit through hundreds of concerts to find a couple of songs that might sound good. So it is possible at some point that someone will have the patience to look through all that and maybe release some of the songs that you're asking about. So,
cool.
Thank you.
And if you can find an ADAT machine that actually still works.
That actually works.
That's the other part of the equation. Okay. Cool. We have a volunteer. James Rhodes, Sacramento, California. James, what's up?
James.
Hey James.
What up?
Balcony. The balcony. I'm one of the countless bass players that he's inspired over the years and fierce defender of Grace Under Pressure as Rush's best album. Nice.
Thank you.
Oh. When I do recording for my bass, I play in a similar manner as you. I attack the bass. Capital letters. Attack. You do attack the bass. And that comes with a fair amount of buzzing and clanking that producers and engineers have always hated and asked me to use a lighter touch. How do you record your bass while still playing with your normal enthusiasm without all that excessive noise?
Well,
Was that something that drove engineers and producers mad?
Yes and no. First of all, the engineer's working for you, dude, not the other way around.
That's
right. And some of that buzzing and clanking is my sound. I mean, and once you layer a bunch of Serbian guitar riffs, a massive drum kit, some shrieking vocals on top, you'll never hear that clanking. It disappears into the background. But what we call a problem sometimes is not a problem. Sometimes that's identifiable as your noise. It's your own creation. So yeah, I can understand that they want to record you as cleanly as possible, and sometimes you get a nasty sound in there, but you don't want to pasteurize, homogenize your sound. You want to be you. So I'd say just make them work at it. Get some compressors out or get a different engineer.
Yeah, fire that guy. Glenn Shikora, NYC. Where's Glenn?
Glenn.
Hey, Glenn.
He's right there, dude. How are you?
I have seen Rush 87 times.
Are you fucking kidding me?
What?
Thank you. You probably paid for this jacket. I appreciate it. I really do appreciate it.
Wow, that's impressive. 87 times from 1979 through 2015. I am in the closing credits of Time Stands Still saluting. Thank you, boys.
Oh.
Good job. That's you? Are you pleased with the recent changes to speed up Major League Baseball games? And what would you do if you became commissioner of the MLB? What would you do? Controversial question.
I love these baseball questions. Well, if I was a commissioner, the first thing I would do was not be the commissioner anymore and assign myself as the GM of a team. But I do like the pitch clock. I was a little hesitant, but it's convinced me the game is better for having it. So I do like that. I don't like the ghost runner on second base and extra innings. That's just a bullshit move. Let them play. But some of the rules I think make sense, and so I try to be supportive of it. But if I was commissioner, I don't know what I'd do to change the game. I kind of liked when both leagues were different. So yeah, it's interesting, you know. I kind of liked before they made the rule where a pitcher has to throw to 3 batters, although it does really extend the game. But yeah, there you go. You're welcome.
Impressive, Glenn. Adrian Sanchez, Fremont, California. Adrian, what's up?
Yo.
Where are you, Adrian?
Where?
Oh, hey.
Hello.
Hey, Adrian. I am 16 and have started to play drums, and after watching Neil's Buddy Rich tribute concert, that's a great footage. Oh man. I actually played the Buddy Rich tribute concert, and that was one of the scariest gigs ever.
Really?
Yeah, like you're counting, like you turn around and like there's 18 guys staring at you that you got to count off, and they'll chop your head off if you make a mistake. Okay, sorry. Enough about me. And after watching Neil's Buddy Rich tribute concert, I have found my muse with big band music and a little bit of jazz.
Great.
Right on, Adrian. Being a new musician and 16, watching the various Rush live concert videos, how did you guys get so much energy to rock out for 3 hours? Good question. Also, any tips on Neil's pre-concert routine? Much appreciate you taking the time.
Okay, great question.
Great question.
We need more musicians of all genders.
Yes.
We need that. I see social media clips of young people from every walk of life, and they're just doing amazing things. So I think the future is bright. Neil's pre-show warm-up. You know, Neil was very set in his rituals, right? He used to have a smoke every hour, on the hour, at the same time, and he did exactly the same kind of warm-up every day. You know, he would get to the show before Alex and I. This is in the last sort of 10 years of our touring lives together. He would get there early because he'd be riding his motorcycle, and he would just arrive before us. And so he would go into his, after he cleaned his motorcycle, of course, he would go in and warm up a little bit. Then we would do sound check once we arrived. And then before the show, he would spend a good 25 minutes doing warm-up routine. I don't know if you have a similar routine.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so he really needed to be loose, and you know, the only athletic job in a band is the drummer. The guitar player and bass player, we're just posing out there. You know? We're throwing shapes, man, and they're working. So, yeah, he was very rigorous, and in fact, he preferred rehearsing to playing in front of an audience, because many people don't know this, but he had stage fright that he had to battle his entire career. So, but rehearsal, he loved it, because he could perfect what he was all about, and he didn't have to worry about a crowd, and he just dug it. So that's his ritual. I can't remember the other part of the question, the first part of the question.
How'd you guys get so much energy to rock out for 3 hours?
Energy.
3
It's a
hours.
function of youth, my friend. Could I still rock out for 3 hours? Good question. I would like to try, though. You know, I know it's the last question, so just in closing, I was the luckiest musician on earth.
We're the luckiest band!
I had two brilliant musicians that were my close pals. One is sadly gone now. But it enabled me to live my dream and to live it with two guys that were there for me. And not only that, raise my game. They forced me to raise my game. And I like to think I did that for them too. So if I could do it all over again, I would do it all over again exactly as we did it. Maybe a few little changes in terms of my family responsibilities. But, anyway, I want to thank you guys for coming out tonight. Thank you for your questions. I want to thank this amazing human being, one of the great drummers in rock and roll. Come on, everybody. Come on. Give it up to Matt Cannon. Thank you for being here. So one last bit of business for you. We want to get our picture taken with all of you. We want to turn on the lights. We're going to move these chairs. You have to be patient because it's an unusual shaped building, so the great Richard Sibbel is going to take 3 photos and then he's going to glue them all together and you'll all be in it.
Nice.
So we're going to give a little space so we don't block out the expensive seats here. You ready, buddy?
Ready, and look up.
All right. Let yourself be known. Keep it going, keep it going. Keep it going. You got it, Rich? We got it. Thank you, thank you, thank you for being part of my effin' life.